Okay, welcome back to the shop, everybody. So in this tutorial, we're going to show you how to make a clock. And we're going to do this one a little bit differently. I've got my wife sitting next to me, and she's going to step in with some questions here and there if she sees something that looks a little confusing or that she wants to actually know the answer to. So let's get started. We'll start with a new model, 14 by 14. We'll put the origin in the bottom left corner. We're going to be working in inches, obviously. And before I see how that works, she's already interrupted me with a question. Why? Because I'm from the United States and I don't know how to work with millimeters very well. Now, I'm not Leighton. Leighton would do this in a heartbeat with millimeters. But in any case, we're going to use inches. And as I always say, we're going to do this the way that I do it. There's a million different ways to make these projects, but here we go. Click on OK. Now we got a work area of 14 by 14. The first thing we're going to do is make the circle for the clock. The clock will be 12 inches in diameter. We'll go over here to the circle tool and click on that. We will hover and drag out, clicking on the left mouse key, dragging out. We'll go over here to this side where we can choose the diameter, and we will make that 12.
But you can choose any size.
That's correct. You can make the clock any diameter you'd like, but in this instance, we're going to use 12. Click Create. Push F9 to put the clock in the middle of your work area. Now we need to do an offset off of this clock inward, and a little bit of this will become clearer as we go along, but trust me, we need the offset. Close out the circle tool. Clicking on the offset tool here. We're going to offset inward 3/4 of an inch right here. We're going to put 0.75. We're going to select inward left, and we're going to offset. So we have our inner offset and our outer diameter of the circle. We can click off of that now. We need one more circle here that we're going to use as a measuring tool. That circle needs to be roughly 1.25 inches in diameter. We'll put that in over here and click Create. It doesn't matter where you put this circle. You can put it in any place that you'd like inside of the other two. We're going to go to the text tool now. First, we're going to click off of it so that we shut that circle off. Then we're going to go to the text tool, and we're going to click inside the circle as best we can, and we're going to put the number 12 in there, a double-digit number. And we want to put that number as close to the inside of that circle as we can get in the center, because we want to increase or decrease the size of the numbers so that they fill that circle. So you can grab a corner and stretch it out just a little bit to make sure that it fits. Click Create over here in the drop down. It looks pretty good to me. That looks like a decent size number for that circle. And we're going to take that circle or that number now. We're going to drag it out of that circle. We don't want it in there for this point. Clicking off. All right, here we go. Now, how do you space these numbers around this circle in an even fashion? It's very, very simply done. Click on the little circle first. As I said, that's our indicator for size, and it's also going to be our indicator for location at this point. Push Shift, click on the inner ring. You're going to go up here to paste along a curve. Click on that. We're going to click on specify number, and we're going to put 12 in the box because there's 12 hours that we're going to put on this clock. Align the copies to the curve, and when I click paste, it's going to pop those little circles all the way around this circle in the correct spots. Just like that. We can close out this menu. All right, now we don't need the inner ring any longer. All we were doing with that inner ring was giving a place for these circles to land on. So we can push delete and remove that ring. Now what we need to do is put the numbers in those little circles. And then after the numbers are in place, we're going to go back through and we're going to delete those little circles. So click on the circles once more. Go over here, click on the group and ungroup button, and click here to ungroup them. That way we can select each individual circle alone. We already have the number 12. Let's zoom out just a little bit and push the text tool. Now, I'll be honest, I struggled with this little step here for quite a while until I figured out how to do this the most efficient way. Clicking on text. What was that, Lisa?
For you.
For me. It's the most efficient for me. Click down here on the bottom underneath. Push. We're going to go from 1 to 11. We're going to put a space in between each number so they're easier to click on and work with. So we'll do 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4, and so on until we get all the way up to 11. We're going to click Create down here. Let's move these guys over so they're a little easier to see in the center of the page. Now these guys are all grouped together and we don't want that. We want to separate those out. So ungroup them, click off of them, and you can click on each individual number now and see that they are separate. That creates a problem here with the double-digit numbers, so we'll go back and we'll highlight both of those and we'll group that back together. We'll highlight the 10 and group those digits together. Now here comes the fancy part. We already have the 12, and the way you put these numbers inside these circles so they're dead center and they're where they belong is this step. Click on the number first to get it active. Click on Shift. Pick the circle where the number goes, release Shift, right click, go to Align Vectors, slide over, slide to the bottom, and click Center. And as you can see, it puts the 12 where it belongs. Click off of the numbers, and you're good. Let's do this 1 or 2 more times so that it's easy to understand. Click on the number first, left click, not left click, just click Shift, click on the number of the circle. Click on the circle. See, it can get confusing if you're not careful. Where you want the number to be, right click, align, sliding over, sliding to center, and it puts it in the middle. Click off again. Let's do the 1 this time. Click on the little circle, right click, align vectors, center to the circle, and you continue all the way around until you have every number in its spot. Now that we have all the numbers where they need to be, we no longer need the little circles. So we'll go along and we'll delete each one of those little circles. Clicking on it, pushing delete, very easily done. We'll get rid of these guys. Oops, don't get rid of the number. And now we want to group these numbers again later, or now, so that it's easier later. Quickest way is to highlight everything, push Shift, push the outer ring, go back to group, and now all of your numbers are grouped together. So that's how you lay out the clock. Now we can fancy this thing up a little bit by putting a relief or some sort of a decoration in the center. We also need a center hole. And what you'll want to do is get the hardware for your clock before you punch that hole in the center so you know what size it is. I'm going to put an arbitrary 1/4 of an inch there just so that we can have the hole there. We're going to put F9 to pop it in the middle. And we'll go back to the cursor tool and click off of it. And now I can put a relief in here of my choosing and continue with this fancy clock. Now it's my intention to give this clock away to a friend of mine, and that friend of mine happens to be an outdoorsman, so I'm going to add some relief images here that I think he might like. This is all kind of an artistic interpretation. There's no rhyme or reason for any of this, but you go up here and click to the Relief Clip Art menu, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop some trees in here. So let's look for some trees. If we go up here in the top and start typing the word tree, we get trees. I want a tree line. It's right here. We'll drag this over. Obviously it's too big, so we go into the corner and we shrink it down to an acceptable level. Again, this is all judgment here at this point to determine what size we're looking for. That looks pretty good right there. Now we need to paste this down, but before we do, we want to make sure that we have this setting here on the right hand side set to merge high, and I'm going to adjust the Z range to 0.4, and I'm going to adjust it pardon me, to 0.4 on all of the pieces that I bring in here so that I can remember it, because I need that number later when we do the V-carve. It has to do with start depth height. So let's click apply. And I think that's in a good position there. It's high enough. I don't like it. It's too close to that 9. Let's raise that up just a little bit. And I see it's running into that 2, so we'll shrink a little more. That looks pretty good. Let's paste that down. All right, so we have a tree line. Let's say we bring this deer into this. We're going to have to adjust the deer for size. I think he's a little too big. And I want to put him in something like this. And again, we're going to just adjust until we get it where we think it looks nice. Let's stretch that just a touch and move it about there. And select him because I clicked off. Now we want to again make sure we're merging high, and I want the Z height at 0.4. Click apply and then paste. And as you can see, it pops the deer on top of the tree line. And let's put in some wolves because they go with outdoorsy stuff. These guys happen to be rather large when you bring them in. You've got to shrink them down. I'm going to put one over here. Let's go a little bit smaller than that. We'll put him howling in the background. Again, 0.4. Click apply. Paste him down. And let's bring another one in. Shrink this one down. Now this one I'm going to turn 90 degrees the other way. And the way I do this is I look at the width up here on the top. Then I grab this little node here and I slide to the left and bring him back across, paying attention to what that number was, which was 1.68. That way I don't lose the aspect ratio. We'll change this to 1.68. Click apply. Now he's facing the direction I'd like him in, but I still want him just a little smaller. And we're going to bring him up here underneath. He's going to have to be smaller yet. And again, this is all artistic expression, if you will. And once you're happy with the settings that you have, I'm going to rotate him just a little bit, slowly. Going back to 0.4 and pasting it down. And as you can see, you can very quickly create an image to create a relief carving with. So I think that looks pretty nice right there. We're going to now create toolpaths, which is very simple. Let's close out this drop-down menu. We don't need this any further. Now to make toolpaths, this will be a simple, straightforward relief. We're going to do the whole relief. We're not going to do any boundaries or anything because I'm doing this carving on an irregular shaped piece of wood. The top is jagged. It's live edge on the top. So when I do the relief, I'm going to mill this entire piece down to the same level so that the carving stands proud. Then we're going to come back in and we're going to do a V-carve for the numbers, cut the numbers in, backfill those with epoxy or paint or some other medium, and continue from there. I will delete this circle in this case because, again, I don't need the boundary. I just need the numbers in there once we carve this. And when we go out to the shop that is the shop, you'll see what I'm talking about. First things first, let's do a relief. Toolpath, again, whole relief. Finishing tool will be a 1/32 tapered ball nose. Select that. Okay, I just said a 1/32 tapered ball nose. You're more than welcome to do that, but that may be a mistake. You're looking at 30 hours of carving if you do that. So I switched to an 1/8 inch ball. That would cut the time down to 3 hours. Again, be advised, 1/32 tapered ball nose, 32 hours of carving. Roughing tool will be a 1/4 inch in this case. It's rather large, but we're going to take off a lot of material that I don't want to waste all that time with a 1/8 inch bit with. Scrolling down, we'll continue with raster. That's fine. All the other settings are fine. We need to adjust the safe Z to 0.1. We need to select the material, and in this case, the material is 1 inch thick, and click OK. We're going to name this deer. Slide that up and calculate. We watch the green bar go across eventually, and we'll see what we get. If this thing turns completely closed in colored, we know we've got the step over correct, which I know I do, and everything will be hunky-dory, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Just like that. All right, we'll close out the machine relief toolpath. We'll click on toolpaths. We're going to turn this light bulb off so that we can get back to our vectors. We're going to select the numbers in this case. We're going to go to V-carve, create a V-bit toolpath. Start depth is where we need to remember, once this thing mills out, we're now down 0.40 inches, and that's where our V-bit needs to begin. So start depth will be 0.4. And you can put a 5 on there, and that'll actually put the bit in just a touch deeper. It'll work better. Maximum depth is 0.125. I don't want to go any deeper than that for the numbers. We're going to go with a 60-degree V-bit. For a roughing tool, you won't have any roughing passes, but we'll put an 1/8 inch in just for the sake of argument. Sliding down, our safe Z is correct. We don't have to reset our material thickness. We're going to put numbers in here. Not New York numbers, we're just going to put numbers. And calculate now. As I said, the 1/8 inch will do nothing, but that's okay. Click OK. And as you can see, it's going to carve out your numbers. Close this out. Right click on toolpaths, and we'll go down and simulate all toolpaths. Let's see what we get. We should get a deer, some wolves, trees, and a bunch of numbers just like that. Go to simulation on the right hand side. Let's change the default to something prettier like, medium oak is my go-to on just about everything. Click apply. And as you can see, we're going to have a very unique clock when we get finished with this. The one thing I forgot was the hole in the center. But that's a simple fix. Delete the simulation. Bring back the vectors. Click on that center vector, that hole. And we'll do an area clearance for that in this case. Click on toolpaths. Click on area clearance. Start depth 0. Finish depth is 1 inch. And in this case, we will use an 1/8 inch end mill. Select that. We'll do an offset strategy. We'll just make this hole. Calculate now. Close the 2D area clearance toolpath selection out, and right click on toolpath once more, and we'll simulate this one more time before we go out to the shop that is the shop. And let's see what we get. Should be deer, trees, wolves, and a hole in the back of a deer. There it is. Let's go out to the shop that is the shop and see if we can make this clock. All right, we're back out in the shop that is the shop, and as you can see, I've got the piece setting on the old Onefinity here. We've got this all fired up and ready to go. You can see, like I said, the piece has live edge. It is an irregular shape. So I've gone ahead and flattened this piece. You should always flatten your stock before you start doing a carve like this to get the best results. And the way I flattened it simply was created a square rectangle as tall as the highest point and as wide as the widest point. Brings me to my next thing. So after I do the relief carving and I want to come back in and put the numbers in here, how do I do that? I don't have anything to zero off of. A simple solution, I employ it quite often, is to make what I call a sacrificial size block or a sacrificial zero block. I don't know what we want to call it. But when you surface this board, the stock that is the project, surface another board alongside it. That way when you switch tools, you simply take your touch block and you set it on there in 0 for Z. No need for a bit setter or anything that any other tool that's like that. Pardon me, it's just as easy to do this. You just set that on there, 0 for Z, bring it over and rock and roll. Now the Onefinity with their controller gives me the ability in cases like this, if I don't want to program, I can just bring the machine over, drop it to a certain height, and I can walk it back and forth and do the flattening process without a program. But in this case, we now have irregular stock, height block. We're going to start with the 1/8 inch end mill. We're going to work from the center out. We're going to drill the hole first. Then we're going to do the relief carving. Then we're going to come back in with the V-bit and put the numbers in. So let's rock and roll here. Like I said, we're going to begin with the hole, and then we'll start going back and forth. And I realized I put that height block too close. It was actually trimming off the block. And then later I realized that it wasn't that I had put it too close. It was that I had changed the stock size to 14 by 14, and that stock was not 14 by 14, it was 13. So I was off center a little bit. We had to do some trimming. And, you know, I could be productive here in the shop right now, but what's more productive than spending time with this guy right here? He loves him some attention, he does. He is always, well, I don't want to call him a nuisance because he's my best buddy in the shop, but he's always right behind me when I'm trying to do something. And as you can see here, we use the block now to 0 for Z off of the original height, as I said. It's a nice little trick. It works very well. And this is actually the first serious carve I've done with the Onefinity since they were gracious enough to give it to me, and I am thoroughly impressed. I can already see the improvement. Speaking of productivity, there's somebody being very productive. She's over there making a new blanket. And of course, she's not allowed to work without her friends there too. Again, here he is. Back to the carve. Again, I say this 1,000 times, but it's always amazing to me. You can take that rough-looking object, rough-looking piece of wood, and that machine runs back and forth over it and takes very, very shallow step-over passes, and it just creates something incredible. And in this case, I hope that the person I'm giving this to really enjoys it. I didn't tell you in the beginning that this is actually going to an Amishman, a friend of mine in New York, and I hope that he can accept it. It's a little bit fancy. They would call that hoekmoot if you were with the Amish, and they strive to be plain, as everyone knows, and that's called daymoot. But we're putting the numbers in here, and like I said, I can see the precision on the machine. There's no bouncing back and forth, no extra movement. And here I'm just showing off a little bit. That is a little set of antlers that I'm putting in the center there. I didn't like that open space, so I said we need to fill that with something. We're going to do a simple V-carve here with some more antlers that are larger. The little ones will remain in the middle. And they really did set this thing off in the end, as you can see here. And I just use a simple wedge. I drive it in to break the bond between the CA glue and the tape. And there we have it. And as you can see, it's off center a little bit, but we're going to trim the left side to narrow it up so it puts it back in the center. Now, I know what you're going to say here. Why didn't you just do this on the mill? And the reason I didn't do it on the mill was because it was a relief carving. I wasn't sure how much depth I was going to have between the rear end of that deer right there where that hole is and the surface. So I decided I would do it by hand. And here, yes, you can do things with a CNC, but if you're very, very careful, you can do them with a Dremel by hand, as they always did before CNCs came out. I was quite pleased with this when I finished it, and I didn't mess it up. The nut sits in there perfectly. I can turn it and lock down the clock mechanism. We throw some hands on it here, and we have ourselves a clock. Next step is 5 to 6 coats of polyurethane, and I'm not going to bore you showing you how we do that. We've shown you that 1,000 times, but once it's finished, I'll move on and I'll show you the finished project here with the magic of YouTube in a few seconds. Okay, there you have it. I guess it's time to end this video. Get it? Time? Clock? I know that one was rough. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, obviously. Please give us a like, subscribe, and share if you haven't done so already. As always, we'll catch you on the next one.